Jacob Gurrah Shapiro emerges as an enigmatic figure, steeped in the shadows of the criminal underworld, his name evoking a mix of fear and fascination. Known for his merciless demeanor, Shapiro's legacy is firmly rooted in the dark realities of organized crime. His intricate alliance with the notorious Louis Buchalter unfolds within the infamous Murder Incorporated syndicate, a lethal network specializing in contract killings. Together, they orchestrated a reign of brutality, leaving a haunting trail of violence and terror. The enthralling saga of Jacob Shapiro and his partnership with Louis Buchalter illuminates their indelible mark on the treacherous realm of organized crime, forever etched in the annals of infamy. Jacob Gurrah Shapiro was born in Minsk, Russia on May 5, 1897 or 1899, and would come to the United States as an immigrant boy 10 years later. He never attended school and even in the latter years could not read or write. In the East Side, he developed his criminal career at an early age, becoming a bully and pushcart thief. He would meet Louis Buchalter one day in 1914 when both of them tried to rob the same pushcart. However, Lepke, who had the brains, figured they could work together as Shapiro had the muscle he needed. This marked the beginning of a long, prosperous friendship that would not end very well for either of them. The nickname Gurrah, he most notably got from his associates, was when he would tell someone to get out of here, which sounded like a rough "get de here." However, in a newspaper clipping published by the New York Times on June 10, 1947, it is believed he got the nickname when the pushcart peddlers would yell, "Get out of here, Jake." Either way, his nickname would become known as Gurrah, short for the way it was said, "Get out of here." Sometime in the 1920s, Shapiro and Lepke would meet the greatest criminal mind of his time, Arnold Rothstein. Encouraged by Rothstein, they entered the lucrative arena of New York labor racketeering, working for Jacob "Little Augie" Orgen. Orgen was jailed on a robbery charge in 1919, and by the time he was released in 1923, he had almost completely lost his gang. He gradually began to build up a powerful organization which included Shapiro and Lepke as well as another rising gangster, Jack Legs Diamond. However, Orgen had another problem on his hands, his old rival Nathan Kaplan, known as Kid Dropper. Kaplan, who grew up on New York's Lower East Side, began committing petty theft at a young age before becoming an expert sneak thief and pushcart extortionist. He was later noted for his ability with the drop swindle and was a former member of Paul Kelly's 5 Points Gang. Around 1910, Kaplan established his own gang, which was affiliated with the 5 Points Gang. In 1911, Kaplan was arrested for robbery and was sentenced to 7 years in Sing Sing prison. In 1918, after his release, Kaplan became involved in labor slugging, lending muscle to either side of strikes, and in 1923, he began to confront growing rivalry from Jacob "Little Augie" Orgen. Soon, both sides were slaying each other, particularly over control of the wet wash laundry workers. Their deadly conflict resulted in 23 murders by mid-1923. That same year, Lepke and Shapiro narrowly missed Kid Dropper just outside his Lower East Side headquarters, killing one of his men and an innocent bystander. Kid Dropper was arrested in August 1923 on a hidden weapon charge, and when he was being moved between courts and into the police car, a local hoodlum identified as Louis Kushner, known as Louis Cohen, leaped forward and shot him through the windshield. Kushner was led to believe by the Little Augie's gang that if he took out Kid Dropper, he would come into their gang in a top position. Little Augie then took control of all Kid Dropper's illegal enterprises, that is, until 1927, when the tables would turn. When labor slugging became less lucrative due to constant police harassment and labor leaders now switching away from violence, Lepke, with the advice from Rothstein, tried to persuade Little Augie to start concentrating on penetrating the local unions with the attempt to take control of them. However, Little Augie refused. Little Augie insisted on sticking to the old ways and shifting a portion of the business to bootlegging. Under Rothstein's management, Lepke saw that prohibition would not last forever, and Lepke recognized that Little Augie stood in their way. Little Augie was walking or standing along 103 Norfolk Street on the Lower East Side with Jack Legs Diamond, his personal bodyguard at the time, on October 15, 1927. Gurrah Shapiro came out of a black touring car and fired a gun, and Lepke, who was driving, also fired shots. Diamond was shot multiple times yet managed to survive, but Little Augie was killed with a bullet to the head. Rothstein was shot and wounded during a business meeting at Manhattan's Park Central Hotel on 7th Avenue near 55th Street on November 4, 1928, and died 2 days later. After his death, Rothstein's protégés, Lepke and Shapiro, took labor extortion in the garment business to new heights. Instead of simply deploying their sluggers and gunmen to terrify labor unions during strike periods, Lepke moved them straight inside the unions, taking control of one local after another through threat, violence, and murder. In the process, these two personally extracted between $5 million and $10 million per year from the garment business rackets. The duo used an army of 250 enforcers and collectors as their backup. Meanwhile, Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano would also profit from Rothstein's death as they moved on his ideas for a new crime syndicate, as well as developing close ties with Shapiro and Lepke. Shapiro and Lepke reached understandings with Dutch Schultz and other Jewish gangsters. Lansky and Luciano in turn won the allegiance of the young mafiosi and other Italian criminals, eventually ousting old-line mafia leaders Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano. After the formation of the new crime syndicate by Charles Lucky Luciano, Lepke was chosen to head the execution arm of the syndicate, which was later dubbed Murder Incorporated, and in turn Lepke selected his longtime friend and muscle, Jacob Gurrah Shapiro, as his aide, alongside Albert Anastasia. Shapiro personally handled a number of contract hits and spent most of his off time recruiting new members for the murder/execution squad. In 1935, Dutch Schultz presented the crime syndicate's ruling board with a proposal to assassinate Special Prosecutor Thomas E. Dewey, who was after him at the time. Without surprise, Shapiro and Anastasia supported the concept. The syndicate was outraged by such a suggestion, and Luciano declared that killing Dewey would only enhance government scrutiny into organized crime and potentially expose the syndicate itself. Anastasia and Shapiro, each respecting their boss and mentor, agreed, but not the Dutchman. He walked out and said he would kill Dewey himself. On October 23, 1935, while Schultz was at the Palace Chop House restaurant at 12 East Park Street in Newark, New Jersey, two Murder Incorporated hitmen named Charles the Bug Workman and Emmanuel Mindy Weiss entered the establishment and shot him while he was in the bathroom. Dutch Schultz succumbed to his wounds the following day. He was 34 years old. Shapiro was known to have a gut feeling that Dutch Schultz was correct, because Dewey then went after the Lepke-Shapiro labor rackets not long after. In 1933, a federal grand jury accused 158 people, including crime syndicate bigwigs Louis Lepke and Gurrah Shapiro. On November 8, 1936, Shapiro and Lepke were convicted for violation of the antitrust laws and racketeering in the fur industry. On June 14, 1937, after being freed earlier on $10,000 bail, the conviction was upheld to Shapiro and not Lepke, but neither one could be found, as they were on the run. On November 8, 1937, the federal government offered a $2,500 reward for the arrest of each, and two indictments were also filed, one for racketeering in the garment industry and the other for the flour trucking industry. The city later added another $5,000 to the rewards, and the FBI got reports that the two had fled the country. However, on April 14, 1938, Gurrah Shapiro walked into the Federal House of Detention at 11 and West Streets and said, "I am Jacob Shapiro, I want to give up." On August 24, 1939, Lepke surrendered to FBI Chief J. Edgar Hoover in front of a Manhattan hotel. Shapiro was sentenced to 15 years to life for labor rackets. Lepke was also sent to prison and later went to the electric chair on an old murder he had commissioned. During Lepke's murder trial, Shapiro allegedly smuggled a message to his friend from the penitentiary. He made him think of Schultz's murder plot on Dewey years back and said, "I told you so." Before Jacob Gurrah Shapiro passed away in prison in 1947, he bitterly told other convicts that he had been a fool to follow Luciano, Lansky, and Lepke, and he would have been okay if he stuck to his own code of violence.